Here we are at 1788 in Double Bay, one of Sydney's most prestigious development sites, with Eddie Mansour of Ray White Projects talking about the market.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
No worries. Tell us a little bit about 1788.
It's an exciting project located in Double Bay, right across from the iconic Intercontinental Hotel, which is formerly Ritz-Carlton. It's a brand new project that's currently under construction. We started off with 31 apartments, which were originally DA approved. We've had a number of amalgamations from buyers wanting larger spaces, so we've now got 28 apartments.
What's the unit mix and what are the size of the units?
That's a great question, Jeff. We had a lot of mixture of 1, 2s and 3 bedroom apartments through the project. Over the last 12 months, we've seen amalgamation of apartments, with many of those 3 bedroom and 1 bedroom apartments being amalgamated, and we've also had some 2 and 3 bedroom apartments amalgamated.
Fantastic. So it's a real eastern suburbs downsizer market.
Very much the case. All of our buyers are locals and are all living within a 5-kilometre radius of the project itself.
It must be pretty exciting working here. It is very well known and quite topical when I talk to development clients. Oh, how are the sales going at 1788? How are the sales going?
We're at 60% sold. We've got 40% remaining.
That's fantastic.
That includes 2 of our penthouses, which will be launched towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, and they'll be a bespoke approach with a particular client.
Are you able to tell us what are the sort of rate per metres and the price range for the apartment?
What we are seeing at the moment is that our amalgamations and our previous sales that we've made, we are still achieving between 38 to 40,000 a square metre. There was a lot of talk that we had dropped, and that wasn't the case. Our amalgamations have certainly been more about people prepared to pay to have the right space for them. And that's been quite exciting for us to watch that, even through what has been a questionable 12 months of marketplace conditions.
Yes, it has. And what's the average time frame from first contact with a purchaser to having an exchange of contract for a project like this?
So it is longer than the general process of somebody buying just a regular 2-bedroom apartment. I don't think there's been one apartment that we've sold where they've just bought the layout as is. There's been a few minor amendments to the internals to suit that particular buyer. So it's generally been that initial contact, they're coming back in a couple of times, bringing their family through. SJD, our developer's been kind enough to allow accessibility to the interior designer and the architect. So typically it's usually about a 12-week process. It's quite interesting with this particular development, being that it's 28 apartments. A lot of buyers are concerned about who's buying in, who are they, where do they live.
How does the eastern suburbs market fare compared to the rest of the Sydney market at the moment?
The eastern suburbs market, we find, has always been about, there's always been a stability in the marketplace in the east, and what we're seeing is that buyers, certainly the transactional, because a lot of the time they're either buying to downsize or they're buying to upgrade. There's not so much a first home buyer typically on a brand new apartment in the eastern suburbs. So that's been a bit more of a stabilised market than some of our projects, say down in the Sutherland Shire, who are typically first home buyers, who have had banking restrictions and a few other bits and pieces. So it's been a stabilised market. It's been more about getting the right fit for that buyer rather than what they can afford to a certain point, but more that, is this the right fit and is it the right apartment for them?
It's echoes of a lot of the discussions I have with clients at the moment, where when the market is soft, areas like the eastern suburbs and the lower North Shore, these typical owner-occupier markets are the ones that a lot of developers and the market sort of focuses on. It's almost like a flight to quality because, as you say, it's more secure, it's more stable, and you're more likely to have greater sales because it's not so, it's more there's more emotion involved, where people really want to live as opposed to a financial equation as an investment.
Absolutely agree. I mean, what we're currently seeing at the moment is a lot of even typical eastern suburb developers who have been developing in this area for many years during a booming market started going outside into Western Sydney, down south into other areas. They're now coming back in and really focusing back on what they know best, which is the east. We're seeing a lot of boutique developments, so a lot of smaller sort of developments from 8 apartments to about 30, as opposed to your bigger towers. We still have got one in Bondi Junction that's 100 and just over, close to 150 apartments that's under just about to start construction. So we are seeing that focus on it, and I think what you'll see in the next 12 months is a lot of boutique projects coming online, and I think that there is certainly an appetite in the marketplace for those apartments.
What do you see have been the biggest challenges to the off-the-plan sales market?
What we're seeing at the market at the moment is that there's been a lot of focus on negative media. Unfortunately, there's been a few hiccups for a very small minority of projects that have set the tone for the rest of the projects out there. And I think that, coupled with the finance restrictions that did come in but now have been relaxed, were part of the catalyst of what was occurring.
And are you seeing that you are seeing evidence of funding for mums and dads buying apartments relaxing?
We are seeing it for owner-occupiers. I believe that investors, it's still a bit more difficult for them. And
Yes.
I think that the investor market has certainly slowed down a bit.
Yes.
Although I sort of look at history, and I guess the last time, which probably wasn't as volatile as what it was in recent times, during the GFC, we actually had a lot of savvy investors or even savvy owner-occupiers that were buying off the plan on the basis that they've seen the property cycle and know that in 2 years' time, when a project will be completed, if they're buying it off the plan, they'll see a different marketplace. So we are starting to see those buyers come back into the market as well, who are seeing opportunity to buy at today's prices, knowing that they're firm believers that the market will be going up in the coming years.
There's been some media recently talking of 10% increases in the next 12 to 18 months. What are your thoughts?
I think so. I think that if you're smart about where you're buying and certainly certain suburbs where there's been growth and a history of growth, I think that you can't go wrong in those areas.
What would you consider to be a reasonable number of apartments selling per month in a development at the moment? And does that change across Sydney?
100%. It changes across Sydney depending on what suburb, what region, what we're sort of seeing in terms of different areas. So in a project like this, we're not sort of seeing, say, the typical off-the-plan process, which has been anywhere between 6 to 10. Is a very healthy number. You're probably more average at we're sort of seeing at the moment is about 4 to 5. And that's what we sort of try and focus on. Some of the other projects that are in different areas have different challenges at the moment, and I think that's the biggest hurdle that we've got. Certainly out in Western Sydney, for example, there's a project we've got in Blacktown. Great project, great team that's been assembled for it, but there are also another 6 projects that are competing at the same price point, offering similar finishes, so that becomes a bit more of a challenge because that becomes a value proposition to a buyer.
How do you go about pitching for a project? How do you go about taking on a project? What's the value that you add?
Great question. We work through a lot of the time with our developers. One of the things I always ask our developers to do is when we're having that initial meeting is send me the plans, and I love printing them out in the good old A3 because I love looking at the plans and working out what's going to appeal to a buyer. One of the projects we recently did, we introduced little study nooks into the apartments so they become a 1-bedroom plus study. And it was done in a way that wasn't compromising any of the other space, but it then all of a sudden created a point of difference to the project. And I think developers appreciate that. I think buyers appreciate that when it comes to the side, but it allows us to add value. I mean, we tap in also to a lot of the local markets.
What are some of the asking prices for some of your larger units here at 1788?
The 1788 project has had quite a bit of amalgamations in these apartments. So typically our 3 bedrooms were between 124 to 142 square metres internally on the larger ones. We've actually had buyers that have bought in here and created 250 to 330 square metre apartments. And those have ranged above the 10 million mark. We've had generally our 3 bedrooms selling anywhere between $5.5 to about $7 million in the project.
Just talking about the market again, it's a big topic and that everybody asks when we talk. For our development clients sort of watching this video, how is the market?
Yeah, look, you're right. It is a topic. Generally I get a call every couple of days from developers who are in or not currently in the market that are asking us that question. Certainly the last 12 months has been a very turbulent sort of period, and I think there's been a lot of questions raised with developers as to whether to park the project that they've got in terms of not launch it to the market or go ahead. And we saw a lot of developers step back. We had a lot of some of the Asian, sort of big Asian developers who had come in and westernised a lot of the projects they've done also step back. So we're currently seeing at the moment that there are a lot less off the plan projects being offered on the market. What we are seeing is the emergence of stock that would have typically just been sold during that off the plan period now become completed brand new stock, and that's now on the market.
Right.
And so that's probably been a lot of our focus over the last 12 months, but we are launching some new projects now, which is giving you a great indication that the market is coming back.